The woman had been in a vegetative state for years, her life reduced to nothing more than a series of hospital visits and daily care. The nurses came and went, each one tending to her with the same routine. But one nurse, who had grown attached to her patient, began to notice something strange. Every day, she would check for signs of life pupils, breathing, a faint twitch of a finger. Everything appeared normal, until one fateful day when, for the first time, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The woman moved, but not in any way a person should. Alone in the room, the nurse was faced with an impossible decision. What had just happened? The hum of fluorescent lights echoed through the quiet hospital corridors as Emma, a dedicated nurse, adjusted her gloves. The midnight shift always carried a peculiar stillness, but room 306 had a weight all its own. Inside lay Mrs. Eleanor Grayson, a woman in a vegetative state for years. To most, she was just another patient. To Emma, she was an enigma, a puzzle wrapped in silence, waiting to be unraveled. Eleanor's story had always intrigued Emma. A socialite in her prime, Eleanor had been the center of attention in high society. Her fall into her current state was as mysterious as it was tragic. No family came to visit, no friends left flowers by her bedside. All Emma had were fragments of Eleanor's past. From the file she had read the life of a woman who once had everything but was now utterly alone. Emma's nightly routine began like any other. She checked the IV drips, recorded Eleanor's vitals, and ensured the room remained serene. But something felt different tonight. As Emma leaned in to adjust Eleanor's blanket, she thought she saw the faintest twitch in the woman's hand. Startled, she froze, staring intently at the motionless figure. "Just my imagination," Emma muttered under her breath. But as the hours passed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. Her instincts as a nurse had never failed her before, and now they whispered that tonight, room 306 would not be ordinary. During her break, Emma sifted through Eleanor's belongings, hoping to find clues about the life she once led. Among the possessions was an old, weathered locket. Opening it revealed a photograph of a younger Eleanor holding a child. The sight tugged at Emma's heart. Who was the child? Why hadn't anyone come for her? Returning to the room, Emma found herself speaking aloud, something she often did during her shifts with Eleanor. "You must have had a fascinating life, Mrs. Grayson," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from the woman's face. "I wish someone would tell me your story." As if in response, the heart monitor emitted a faint spike. Emma's eyes darted to the screen, her pulse quickening. Could it have been a fluke? She approached Eleanor, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Grayson? Can you hear me?" A long silence followed, but then, as if her presence had awakened something deep within, Eleanor's lips parted ever so slightly. Emma's heart raced. She leaned closer, desperate for any sign of consciousness. But before she could call for a doctor, a shadow moved in the hallway. She turned quickly, but no one was there. The atmosphere grew heavier, and a chill ran down her spine. The next day, Emma couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Determined to investigate further, she stayed after her shift, diving into Eleanor's medical records. There were periods of time unaccounted for in her history. A name kept appearing in the margins: Dr. Malcolm Rayner, the neurologist who had initially handled Eleanor's case. Emma decided to visit the hospital archives, where she uncovered old reports and notes from Dr. Rayner. They detailed Eleanor's unexpected collapse during a gala years ago. The cause? Undetermined, but one phrase in his notes caught Emma's attention: suspicious circumstances. Her curiosity piqued, Emma began piecing together a timeline. She discovered that Eleanor had filed a restraining order against an individual weeks before her collapse. The name was redacted, leaving Emma with more questions than answers. That night, Emma returned to room 306 with a renewed determination. As she checked Eleanor's vitals, she noticed a faint tear sliding down the woman's cheek. Emma gasped. "You're in there," Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're trying to tell me something." Suddenly, the heart monitor began to beep erratically. Panic surged through Emma as she called for help. Doctors rushed in, stabilizing Eleanor's vitals. But as the chaos subsided, Emma noticed something startling. Eleanor's hand was gripping the locket Emma had left on the bedside table. The following evening, Emma couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. Someone or something didn't want her digging into Eleanor's past. She began noticing strange occurrences, files misplaced, phone calls that ended abruptly when she answered, and the feeling of being watched. Determined not to be intimidated, Emma reached out to a retired nurse who had worked at the hospital during Eleanor's admission. The woman hesitated at first, but eventually relented, sharing a shocking revelation. Eleanor had been poisoned. Emma's mind raced. If Eleanor had been poisoned, who was responsible? And why? The locket, the restraining order, the redacted name, all signs pointed to a deeper conspiracy. Late that night, as Emma sat by Eleanor's bedside, she whispered, "I'll find out what happened to you. I promise." To her astonishment, Eleanor's fingers twitched again. This time, there was no mistaking it. Emma grabbed her hand gently, tears streaming down her face. "You're not alone," she said. "I'll make sure they pay for what they did." But the moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside the door. Emma turned, her heart pounding. A man in a suit stood there, his expression cold and calculating. "Miss, I suggest you stop asking questions," he said, his voice dripping with menace. Emma's resolve only hardened. She reported the encounter to the hospital administration, but they dismissed her concerns. Frustrated yet undeterred, Emma took matters into her own hands, contacting a journalist known for exposing corruption. Together, they uncovered a web of deceit involving high-profile individuals who had sought to silence Eleanor after she threatened to expose their crimes. The poison had been meant to kill her, but instead it left her in a vegetative state, a living reminder of their misdeeds. As Emma revealed the truth, public outrage swelled. Eleanor became a symbol of resilience, her story inspiring countless others to fight against injustice. And on one fateful evening, as Emma sat by her side, Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. Though her recovery was slow, Eleanor's first words were filled with gratitude for Emma's unwavering dedication. "You saved me," she whispered. In the months that followed, Eleanor and Emma worked together to bring the perpetrators to justice. Their bond grew, not just as nurse and patient, but as friends united by a shared mission. Eleanor's strength returned, and with it, her determination to reclaim her life. The hospital became a beacon of hope, its staff inspired by Emma's courage and Eleanor's resilience. Their story became a testament to the power of compassion, truth, and the indomitable human spirit. And as Emma wheeled Eleanor out into the sunlight for the first time in years, they both knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter.